Everybody focus on the very, very serious issues. Today is the 40th day anniversary of the tragic and barbaric school children in Peshawar, teachers and some of the staff that was there. I think it's absolutely horrendous. We also want to recognize what happened in Paris as well, and the barbaric killings there also of the journalists and the police and the innocent people who were not engaged in that. So I think it's a serious issue for us to look at. But also I think you will see today if you look at what's happening at the moment, 40 people are attending then. If you look at Sweden, if you now look at what's going to be starting to develop in terms of the far right in France, and possibly here in terms of UKIP, what they've been saying, and also in terms of EDL, who will obviously seek to capitalise on this. So I think there's a significant movement that's changed, particularly since 7/7, so we need to be aware of what that is. And also I think what we need to do is look at how the Muslim community looks at this, how we deal with it, how we're going to respond to this. And there is an onus on us to look at this, and people can say, well, no, this is an issue about trying to, again, victimize the Muslim community. I don't think the issue is about victimization of the Muslim community, it's about coming to address the issues. When we talk about the number of young people that have gone across, and those young people, and why they were able to be groomed by those individuals who actually made that link across. I have had two in my constituency who went across, and luckily they came back in one piece, and we had to deal with that. So there are a number of other people who I don't know about, who some I do know about that have gone out in different areas, and so we need to seriously address. And that we have to do in terms of the theological debate that we need to have, the discussion that we have within the community of our learned scholars who need to be looking at that. Perhaps some instances, I would say not so learned scholars, and that's what the difference that we've got to make and deal with those sort of issues. So before I go on too long, I've got to shoot off in a minute to a vote at 7 o'clock, and as a way of perhaps moving the discussion forward, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Mrs. Huma Price. Now, I'm not going to, she's a barrister, but I'm not going to tell you how many years she's been practicing for, because it doesn't look like that would be her age anyway, so I'm not going to that. And the fact that she specialises in immigration and family law, two very, very difficult issues. And I was very intrigued to see, as I am a Facebook friend of hers, to see when she's getting ready to go off to battle. And normally when she comes out, she says, yes, I won again. And so I think it's a very good work that she does. She's also a broadcaster and a TV presenter. She has her own legal show on Venus TV. And most importantly, above all that, she's the Secretary of the Third World Solidarity Group, which she does absolutely well. But I think it's people like her who have actually made a stand, who actually have shown what it is not to be isolated from the community, but for people who stand to look at integration, to see how we move forward. And she does that in her normal life, and that's fantastic. But we need to do that. She is somebody who's kept her heritage, her culture, poetry, and all of those things together in a relationship which sometimes people in the community would deride. But I think it's good strength to her elbow, the fact that she's proud of the relationship she has and the way she's moved forward. And that's what we need. We need more people to be able to be proud of their heritage, culture and religion, but still be open there and actually be able to speak to people. So before I go on trying to speak all about her speech, she's speaking today about the criminality aspects of terrorism. Huma.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Khalid. I'm really very touched. Thank you. I want to bring the perspective of a lawyer, a barrister, to this whole debate, because we've heard a lot of very political things about it. So whenever there is a terrorist attack, the first thing we do is we label the terrorists. We label them Muslim, freedom fighter, jihadi, depending on our own beliefs. To me, as a barrister and a lawyer, anyone who kills another human being is first and foremost a murderer and a criminal. And to me, that necessitates the importance of building a psychological profile of him in order to deal with him effectively. That is something which seems to be missing. So going back to the Peshawar attack, obviously we were all shocked and horrified at the savagery and the brutality with which children as young as 6 were butchered at point-blank range. And we also reacted quite rightly at the time with a lot of anger and backlash, demanding immediate retaliation of this attack. military courts were immediately set up, and I believe some hangings took place immediately. The incident itself almost got drowned in the backlash at the horror of the whole world to what had happened. And all types of evil punishments were suggested for the brutes who committed this attack. Actually, the savages who carried out this attack were all killed on the same day in the army operation that dealt with it. So we need to formulate more long-term strategies in dealing with similar savages in the future. And if you saw their photos, you would understand why I'm referring to them as savages. And today I want to focus on one aspect of this attack, which perhaps hasn't been talked about as much, in order to emphasize the need for building a criminal profile of these people in order to deal with them effectively. They shot the children at point-blank range, but they carefully came prepared with petrol to burn the teachers alive, and that's what they did. They burnt all the adult teachers, even the head teacher, all of them were women, gave them as painful deaths as possible by drenching them in petrol and burning them alive. And before people shrivel up in horror at what happened to the teachers in Peshawar, I want to digress a little bit and stop for a second and remind all of us that this is not the first time a group of people have burnt women. We only need to look at the history of India, where women were burnt alive with their dead husbands prior for centuries, until a group of activists took it upon themselves to stop this inhumane practice, wrongly attributed to religion, Hindu religion. And that still hasn't stopped the accidental deaths of women in kitchens all over India, but there is a law in place that arrests the family members immediately when a death like that occurs. At least steps have been taken to deal with that problem. And then why go that far from home? We only need to go back a couple of 100 years in this country to remind ourselves that 9 million women were publicly burnt at the stake for suspicion of being witches. And this practice was attributed to the church. It's funny how religion is always used as a weapon for terrorizing women. And it's really interesting that the test for whether you're a witch or not at the time was that women were thrown into the river. If they drowned, they weren't witches. They were innocent. And if they surfaced alive, then they were witches, and then they were burnt alive in full public view for possessing supernatural powers. So history is repeating itself here. We have another group of people burning women in the name of religion. And let's not kid ourselves. The terrorists have stated categorically that a woman should only come out of her house twice in her lifetime. Once after her nikah, when she goes to her husband's house, and the second time as a dead body to go to the cemetery. Now, was this burning of women just a misogynistic act? Is that the reason why these women were all burnt? And they were all teachers, you know, they were not sinners, they were not whores who were doing anything unlawful, sinful. They were respectable women who were the wives and mothers of army personnel. And I believe that they were burnt alive for not following the religious code of the terrorists and daring to follow a career and going out of their houses to work. They were not just burnt. We need to get inside the minds of the terrorists here. That's what I'm trying to emphasize. The terrorists gave them the rightful punishment of burning in the fire of hell. And that's what they believed they were doing. They were putting these women in hell for coming out. They duly enforced their religious punishment. And so what we need to do is we need to get into the minds of these terrorists. They have a religious agenda. We all know that. And they come out of their hiding places seeking heaven. They want to die and they want to go to heaven. Now they want to die, and how are we dealing with them? We are going to hang them and kill them. We're going to give them exactly what they want. We are going to reward them for their terrorist activities. How clever is that? How many more terrorists are going to be born to look for shahadat and look for martyrdom as a result of the punishment that we have thought for them in our anger, in our vindictiveness, and without thinking and getting into the minds of these people? So I just want to say, please, the powers to be, make criminal profiles of these people. and then decide how to deal with them. They have an ideology, they have an idea, and you can't kill an idea by force. You can only kill an idea with an even more powerful idea, and that's what we all need to work on now, a more powerful ideology. Thank you very much.
And we start, well, David's going to be speaking for a few minutes because I think we're going to vote in about...
I'm a vote.
You're not going to, honestly. David, please. David is the chair of the Third World South Africa. Freshly elected again.
Thank you. I feel all right if I don't stand up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I just say, as far as I feel, any human life that's lost is a sadness, and particularly children's lives. But I think, while we can feel sad for what happened in Peshawar and in Paris and in Nigeria, we've also got to have an element of disgust that people use these lives as a way of pursuing their own ends. It's completely and utterly wrong and must be stopped. But I've got to say, and I'm not sure if I'm the only person who feels this, but I felt quite uneasy about the reaction about what happened in Paris compared to what happened in Peshawar. And there's a lack of equivalence in the respect that we show to the people who have died. 150 young children died simply because the fathers were soldiers. A number of journalists, and it shouldn't have been any of them, but a number of journalists died because they happened to write and do things that the people who opposed them didn't like. But the reaction from the world was just so unbalanced. The Peshawar thing, if you look at the reaction from the leadership of the world, it's gone. And yet what do we see in the streets of Paris? 4 million people across the country, 45 leaders of the nations of the world walking through the streets of Paris. Apart from the imbalance between what they did about that and what they did in Peshawar, there's a huge element of hypocrisy. The President of Israel walking through against the terrorist attack when his state has committed state terrorism for 70 years against the people of Palestine. The ambassador of Saudi Arabia on the streets of Paris campaigning for the freedom of speech, then going back home to get somebody to administer 1,000 lashes to a man who's been locked up for setting up a liberal website. The Russian foreign minister walking through the streets, again, to show respect for people who died for freedom of speech. It's not a very good track record in Russia, is there? And the Egyptian foreign minister also there, and he goes home to a country where they've jailed people from Al Jazeera. Completely and utterly hypocritical. And it took me back to 2006 when I went to Israel for the first time. When I went, I went with one of our colleagues from the European Parliament. I insisted that I wanted to go to Palestine and meet the newly elected leaders of Hamas. And the colleague I was with had been in Palestine when the elections took place in 2006, and he said, "We've never ever seen any democratic election run as fairly as the election in which Hamas was elected." But what did the West do? They refused to accept the democratic will of the Palestinian people, and they refused to recognise Hamas. And I'm convinced that if we took that brave step then on the West, we could have been in a very, very different situation in Palestine and Israel. We chose not to, and it's one of these things that really grieves me, that we like democracy as long as it gives us the results that we like. Similar situation to what's happening in Ukraine. For all the rights and wrongs in Ukraine, the Ukrainian people elected the president that the West didn't like, so the West had to undermine him and replace him. If they left him alone, we might not be seeing the change that we are now. At the end of the day, I take on board what our colleague said earlier. Where do we go from here? I think that without a doubt, as a world, we really do have to start focusing on sending out a message that we respect everybody's lives equally. And the best place in the world to do that is in Palestine. And we should redouble our efforts to make sure we get some real progress there. And if it takes stronger sanctions or ostracising Israel in the eyes of the world, then so be it. And I'm not anti-Israel. I want to see a proper solution to that benighted part of the world. But as long as that sore is allowed to fester, it gives people who want an excuse, a real excuse, to carry on doing the sorts of things they're doing across the world. But if we resolve it, it gives us, as a world community, a chance to say we can live together, we can put things right, and torn apart. If you look in our own part of the world, the huge strides we've made in the last 15 years in Northern Ireland, it's not perfect by any means. But the difference between where we are now and where we were in 1998 when the Belfast Agreement was signed, when if you think in 30 years, almost 4,000 people died. In the 17 years since, there's about probably 20 people died, 22 many, but far removed from the 4,000s that we're seeing. I've got to say as well, and Tariq raised his talk, I think the letter that went out yesterday, David Cameron said if people got a problem with this letter, they've got a problem. Well, I'll tell you, I've got a problem. I thought it was a disgrace. If you took the word Muslim out, and you took the word Imam out, and you wrote to the Jews, and you wrote to a rabbi, or you wrote to the Catholics, and you put Dear Father, or you wrote to the Anglicans, they would have been outraged. Because what it was saying was, you've got to prove that you've got a right to have British values. Why should you have to prove that? Any more than I would have to. I'm not religious at all. Why should I be saying as being more British than what you are? The people who live here, contribute to this country. I mean, I've got huge respect for the people that I've met, mainly through Mushtaq, the Muslim community in my part of the world. Without those people, hundreds, if not thousands of people of the indigenous population in my part of the world would be unemployed. So I've got huge respect for the work they do. But even if that wasn't the case, to actually point to one religion and say, you've got a problem, the fact that using religion is a really negative anyway. Because, you know, whatever your culture, you know, your religion is only part of what you do. It isn't you completely, because you've got other things that make you what you are as human beings. But I just think that that was a huge mistake. I thought the mistake was bad enough. I thought the offhanded way in which the Prime Minister treated it was an absolute disaster. And I hope to God that we don't live to regret that crass efforts that came out yesterday. I hope between us we can try and find a way forward. I know that people have been sitting at this house for at least 70 years, but the truth is, we make from this part of the world a real step in the right direction of saying we want to try and right the wrongs. And this is not saying like, you know, you're more to blame than we to blame. We all go back, you know, go back to the end of the First World War, who drew the lines, who let the, you know, the Israelis take over Palestine. We'll have all that debate time and time and time again. Until we make a real concrete step in the right direction, all it will do is carry on feeding the people who want to exploit the differences between us. And people with the right frame of mind shouldn't allow that. And we need to do it, and we need to do it soon.
Who's going to take over now? So we both, I'm in a moment here, so who's going to take over?
Thank you very much, Khalid Mahmood Saab, for chairing half part of it. Now I'm taking over, and let me say a few words. I agree with every word David said, and I think he's taken all thrust of what I wanted to say. But I just wanted to say two things. It's all right. You were the first, so you had the first right. Let me tell you, I totally agree that I think the response of the world and how Pakistan is being victim of this terrorism is not very welcome. The double standard which Dave has just mentioned are huge, and we all know about it. We only see when Gaza is attacked by F-16 that on London streets there are 50,000, 100,000 people, and once it is gone, it is forgotten again. So we have to look at, in a more broader way, how we live in this world. There is 7 billion people living on this earth, 6.5, but I think they are expected 7 billion. So we have to look them as a human being. Not that these are Muslims, sectionalize them. These are Muslims, these are Jews, these are Christians, these are Asian, these are others. I think as a human being, everybody has the same right. And that is my basic principle. One thing which is very important is that when Pakistan, it is nothing, it is just a bell for the vote, so some of the MPs will disappear. Thank you. Let's have a little pause, because it is 2 seconds and I don't want... The people who come first time, they feel there is a fire alarm, but it is not. It is just... Thank you. There will be another short bell, but I think I will keep on speaking during that. So I think we have to look, as I was saying, that there are people, whether they are from Pakistan, India, Palestine, Kashmir, or from Britain, they should be treated as equal. And same, the blood has the same color. So Pakistan, and I wouldn't go into history, I think most of you know that why Pakistan is in the state where it is. I fought against Ziaul. I thought he was the demon in Pakistan because he changed the whole direction of Pakistani society. And we are facing that even today. And I think Pakistan has given too long and too big sacrifice. 50,000 people have been killed since 9/11. And none of the people who did 9/11 were Pakistanis. It is a bad luck that Pakistan is geographically placed in a position that there is India on one side, there is Iran on one side, Afghanistan on third side, and China is also neighboring. So I think Pakistani leadership didn't use people of Pakistan proper values, and they should have done better. But they let West, which Dave has also mentioned, use Pakistan as a fighting force against Russian forces and communism. And that's why today we are where we are. I think another very important point is that Pakistan since